everybody. Welcome to the Good Doctors YouTube channel. I am Dr. Erin.
I'm Dr. Kristen.
You're very welcome to today's Good Doctors Diagnose for Monday, February 15th. We're halfway through what is the month of snow, if you are in the state of Pennsylvania, on either end, which Dr. Kristen and I are. There's just a lot of snow happening.
It's just Narnia out there. It's just got to find some Turkish delight because it is Narnia.
As far as the eye can see, there's just a lot of snow. But we're here today with our Good Doctors Diagnose, and we want to have a conversation about social media because we're having this conversation a lot. We have a group of interns right now through our partnership with Charleston Southern University. We also work with Professor Emery Hyatt and her social media and marketing class to do a lot of research in understanding generational differences and social media and job expectations and a whole host of things. But we've had a couple interesting conversations about what we think about social media as older millennials and what these students who we're engaging with from 20 to 22 years of age think about social media. And we've had a few thoughts. We want to have a chat with you today.
I think of YouTube as social media.
Samesies.
Because this is it for me. I think that it's about content creation more than interaction, if that makes sense. So like when I think of social media, I think of it as spaces where there are no like necessary gatekeepers to who can produce and create content.
Right.
But there are different kinds of social media. Like YouTube is much more passive. TikTok is passive. Snapchat is passive. Twitter for a lot of people is passive. We just call them lurkers when they're passive. So then like you have the social media networks that are more I guess focused on creating a community. So you've got your Discords, you've got
Reddit?
Your old school Facebooks. I don't think Facebook really does that anymore.
No.
MySpace back in the day, Bebo.
Yeah, and I think like this conversation kind of came about in a discussion with one of our interns about how different generations utilize social media.
Yeah.
For what purpose. And our generation, certainly of the MySpaces and the Bebos and the Facebook originally, it was a lot about social interaction and building community. And now that we have brands coming in and advertisements coming in and a lot more platforms in which you can create and engage in content production, it's changed the landscape of what these platforms do. And interestingly enough, we've heard a lot from our Gen Z cohorts that we spend time with that they don't consider YouTube or TikTok social media because
they don't do anything with it.
They don't do anything with it. A lot of them just watch videos. Like it's very passive. And it's more like television than when we were kids, we just had television. So it's interesting to us that it's changing the landscape, and we feel like it's changing it obviously for, cultural discussions in the ether, but also I think there's a lot we can learn and talk about in terms of how do we bring these people into the workforce and how do we manage their different perceptions of what these platforms are? How do we engage them on them? There's a whole host of questions that come into what started out yesterday with the two of us going, do we need a new definition for social media?
Yeah, and that was because it turns out we don't though, because what's the Merriam-Webster one? Because we agree with the Merriam-Webster one.
We do. So as the researchers that we are, as soon as we asked that question, we started Googling furiously for different definitions. But we like the Merriam-Webster one, which is quite thorough. For social media is forms of electronic communication, such as websites for social networking and microblogging, through which users create online communities to share information, ideas, personal messages, and other content, such as videos. I think the only thing I would maybe take out of that is I don't know how much of it is driven by the creation of communities on every platform.
Correct. There are definitely certain platforms that are more community based. And it's interesting to me, even YouTube, which is very passive, a lot of the big famous content creators have communities.
Sure.
And you pay to be in them. And it's, I don't know, I think so much of this for me is about the democratization of content.
Yeah.
That's truly what what social media is this democratization. But I can also respect that for a generation that grew up with YouTube, that YouTube functions like television. And the more and more people I talk to that are cord cutting and that watch a lot of because for anyone who isn't an active YouTuber, because this is something I wasn't until about 2 months ago, and I've become much more into the platform. So if you just kind of watch videos passively and you're just kind of here, or you're a friend of ours who clicked from somewhere else, hi. If you have a YouTube account and you subscribe to channels, you can open up your YouTube account every day and you'll get notifications of all the videos that you have to watch that are new. So hypothetically, you don't need to search anything out. You don't have to set a DVR. You don't have to do all the other things that traditional cable asks you to do. You can also find down rabbit holes of very specific topics. And we need to have a conversation about the difference between echo chambers and customized online experiences.
Yeah.
Because I think those are different but parallel issues. But yeah, I think at the core of it, social media for me has to be user-created content.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's so interesting about looking about this cross-generationally, right? Is what your perception of consuming information is and what your experiences of it are. And the unique differences between specifically our generation who came of age during this growth spurt of technology and devices and internet and platforms and services, and straddled that line of having a more analog childhood and a much more digital adulthood, with the generation immediately behind us, Gen Z, is that they've been entirely digital. So I kind of understand why they would see YouTube that way, because they didn't grow up in their adolescence with these gatekeepers saying the only way you can access entertainment is through the television. The only way you can learn about and engage with celebrities is through magazines or the television. So there were these very, at the time, traditional forms of media that were curating what we could engage with for us in a way to make money. And now almost everybody's favorite celebrity has some social media platform, if not all of them. And you have all of this organic, homegrown, user-created content where you can tell your own stories. You don't have to rely on other people to tell you what stories they think are important or what they think you should be interested in.
Yeah, and that's been a shift in my 20s and 30s, was kind of thinking about the content I want to consume. And realizing, even in the last 6 months, being like, I don't really care about this show on Netflix that everyone is talking about. I really want to watch 25 hours of expose videos on multi-level marketing companies. Good news, that's what YouTube is for. And so I can just fire up YouTube and we'll go whole days in my house now where we don't turn on the television, but we watch YouTube every night. And it's because that's just where our particular nerd questions are right now. And I don't know, I hope that you can hear that we are wrestling this out and we are not sure. But in terms of, we think this is an important question for a lot of reasons. Obviously, this is a little bit less polished than some of our other videos because we really are talking it out with you right now. Wow. When you hire somebody to be a brand manager and they're right out of college, does this perception of what social is affect how they brand manage? If you're thinking they're going to do this very specific thing, but they don't see YouTube as social media, what? So you're expecting them to run a community and respond to comments and all this other stuff. And they're like, no one ever responds to comments on YouTube. Why would I bother? This is some stuff that perhaps we have to wrestle with a little bit more intentionally than we have been so far.
Yeah, and I think we talk a lot about how older generations engage with social media differently and have different perceptions. Whether seriously or comedically, we talk about kind of the olds using Facebook and not understanding how it works. And I think there's a perception that because our generation and Gen Z understand how social media works, that we might feel the same about it, or that we might engage with it the same way. And the more we get Gen Z emerging into adulthood, into their 20s and into the workplace, the more we're understanding that we have very different perceptions of it.
Yeah.
And so if you are a leading millennial and you're hiring someone out of Gen Z for whatever position, and you haven't thought about those generational differences, especially if they're going to be required to engage in social media, we really recommend that you do and have an open conversation with yourself about what your perceptions are, and with them as well as a candidate, because you can fall down a lot of unhelpful assumption rabbit holes that can end up harming your ability to hire the right person, harming your culture and bringing in that employee if they're not the right fit. Just by saying, a couple quick questions about what they think social media is, you can learn a lot about a person and an age cohort.
For sure. But we want to know your thoughts. So where are you in the generational spectrum? What do you think of social media? Tell us what your first social media was. Ours was AOL Instant Messenger.
For sure.
Or like AOL message boards, depending on how we're defining social media. But AOL Instant Messenger was a big part of our lives.
Huge.
So tell us, we'd love to hear.
Yes. And if you are fans of what you have seen or heard and you are not already a subscriber, please make sure and subscribe, hit the bell, ding, so that you can get notified whenever we put up content, which is pretty much every day these days, on a whole host of topics, culturally related, however we can work it out. So we hope we hear from you in any of those capacities, and we'll see you guys next week.